Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and joining me today is Lynne Bowman. Lynne is the author of the Amazon bestseller Brownies for Breakfast and has collaborated with actress Deidre Hall on two other publications, Deidre Hall's Kitchen Close-Up and Deidre Hall's How Does She Do It? Her career spans from award-winning creative director in Silicon Valley to creative director at E.J. Gallo Winery and advertising manager at Redken Laboratories. Lynne's also been an actress, makeup artist, screenwriter, illustrator, legal journalist, and even a television weather person. Lynne, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here, as you already know. We're having a good time already.
I know. I was just going to say, for the listener, we have been having a conversation, finally had to just say, okay, stop. We have to record this thing because we were having such a great conversation and we want to bring you into it as well. Let's start off with the book. So I know that you say that you're living proof that you can cook and eat and sleep and laugh and work your way out of type 2 diabetes. And I think that's what led you to writing Brownies for Breakfast, because it's a cookbook for diabetics, right? So talk to us about that. Like, how did that go down and how did you decide to write a cookbook?
Well, and it's a long story, as it is with so many of us women. You know, my life involved all these different things. I was a single mom, had 3 little ones, had a pretty demanding career. I had left a terrible marriage. That was a whole ball of snot, as we say in the trade. And it stays with you. It doesn't just suddenly disappear overnight, right?
Yes.
But one of the constants in my life was I knew I had to eat well and I had to feed my kids well because I was going to refuse to die. I was not going to leave my kids by being ill or being dead, either one. And my mom had died when I was young, Marianne. And so I was 18 and she had been ill for a long time. So my life, I didn't even realize how deeply affected I was by that because it was my normal. With so many of us, you know, you don't understand until you're looking back from a long time afterwards. How in the world did I do that? You know, how did that happen? It was my normal. So I knew I had to stay strong, and I intuitively knew that to do that, I had to eat reasonably well. And I was determined to feed my kids reasonably well, but I also never had any money and never had any time. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right? I mean, I spent some time at 10 o'clock at night in the discount canned goods store with my kids. Okay, raise your hands if you know what I'm talking.
Sure.
Yeah. But over the years, I also realized that my kitchen table was the center of my universe, and my clients, my friends, my kids, that's where we gathered, and that's where we exchanged information and taught each other. And I always understood sort of intuitively that you needed some food, you needed a pretty table if you could manage it. And I also felt strongly that my kids needed that education of how to prepare a meal and how to put it on the table and how to grow it. All those things were an integral part of being human as far as I was concerned, not something that you were going to ask somebody else to do for you. So as a family, we ate, you know, and we sat down and we talked. And so now I get all hot and bothered looking at how many people are eating out of a paper bag in the back of a car or a steering wheel. I'd love to kind of shift that if I can have any part of it. And writing my book was a sort of combination of telling people how not to be diabetic, because I was not told how not to be diabetic. No matter how many times I asked, no matter how hard I tried, the information just wasn't there. The medical community was not, I don't know how to say this, they were certainly an educated bunch of people, but all they knew to say was lose some weight. Where have you heard that before? Right. Well, if I could lose some weight, I would have lost some weight. Okay. And in my case, I wasn't particularly overweight. I don't know, at times in my life, I was probably 20 pounds, maybe 25 pounds over my ideal weight, but I wasn't what you would call obese or really troubled. I was a mom. Keeping your waistline at 24 is not a priority for you, so you don't do it. But the book came about because I thought it was needed, and it was the book that nobody wrote for me. I wanted to have that out there for the other people who needed it. And plus I love to do the writing and the photography. And by the way, I took all the food pictures myself so that I could say that no stylists were harmed in the making of it. And so that you would know that the food you made from it was going to look like the picture. It wasn't some product of 15 people in a room with the lights and the stuff. It was me in a kitchen with my stuff. And I want you in your kitchen with your stuff to be able to do the same thing. What is that thing? It's eating great, yummy food like you want and having it be super healthy. And having you, as a result of eating this way, by the way, I will promise you, you will lose weight. You will. If you're overweight, you'll lose weight. But also, you will love the food and you'll feel way better and you won't get sick. And if you've got GERD, that's going to go away. And if you've got issues with your belly, it's going to go away. Because eating the way I suggest is not keto and it's not carnivore and it's not, I don't journal and I don't count calories and I don't measure how many grams of anything I'm eating. I eat until I want to stop eating. That's what I want for you. All I ask you to do is eat good food.
Is it primarily built around whole food?
Real food. That's it.
Yeah. And did you come up with the recipes in the book, or were these given to you? Were these like your favorites? How did that come about?
Okay. We're going to have to level here now. I stole a couple. I was given a couple, but most of them are mine because I'm a lazy cook. I needed to always be able to put dinner, whatever meal it was, on the table in 15 minutes because there were dogs barking and kids and people coming up the driveway. I didn't have time. I didn't have the patience. I didn't have the money. So the food in here is not expensive, not complicated, easy. And I promise you, when you put it on the table, people will go, oh my gosh, because there are all these little tricks on just, do this, just put that in. And all of a sudden, an ordinary thing becomes wow, just with a technique.
So you're elevating it.
Yes, absolutely. Because I want you to eat beautiful. I want you to have joyful meals. Because, and also this has to do, and I know you've had a number of people on your show, and thank you for that, who talk about disordered eating and addictions. And one of the things I think we don't acknowledge is that we need to be satisfied with our food mentally. Our olfactory system, it needs to smell great. It needs to look great. It needs to feel good. The texture needs to be wonderful. The color, all of it. And that's why I'm talking about eating with other people and making a little more of a ritual of it, because that's how you nourish yourself with the food. It has to be nutrient dense and, real whole food and all those things. But also it has to spiritually, fill you up. It's meant to.
Well, I think about when you talk about everything at the kitchen table, and before we jumped on, we both talked about, we both have grandchildren. One of the things I started with mine is having a big family dinner available at least twice a week. Then my girls come, their families come, the kids come, and we sit and we have dinner, right? And it's not necessarily anything fancy, but I do cook dinner twice a week for everybody. And it's a gathering place. It's a gathering place, and we get to spend quality time together. And I think, to your point, it's a lot more than the food, right? It's about
not just the food ever.
Yeah.
It's the connection. Mm-hmm. And good for you. To me, that's just the most wonderful thing you can do.
I'm lucky.
You are lucky. We are lucky. Mm-hmm. Yep. But So I don't believe in struggling over any of it. There are so many recipes in my book that are 2 ingredients, 3, 4 ingredients. That's it. And it's all the stuff that you already have. I am not going to send you down the street for something exotic that you've never, except one thing. And I want to bring that up right away.
What's that?
Here's a thing that you are not probably going to find in Safeway or Winn-Dixie. You might need to get it online because there are only 2 or 3 sugar alternatives that are worth a dang, that taste good, that are healthy, that don't give you indigestion. But if you have a good sugar substitute, you have solved your problem with foods that you crave, because this book, trust me, has some naughty, fabulous food in it. Donuts, hello, cakes. It's not all sweets at all. But my first chapter is sweets because, let's be honest, you don't have a carrot problem. You don't have an arugula problem.
How do you know?
Okay.
True story. Who does?
I got your number here. I start out by saying, okay, but you can have the most wonderful sweets ever, but you have to make them. I'm sorry. You have to make them. You cannot go into Starbucks and eat the croissants or the bagels or anything. You and regular old refined flour are done, because it's worse than sugar. It is sugar. It's worse than sugar. So I'm going to ask you to give up a couple of things. One of them is real sugar, refined cane sugar. Also, if you're diabetic, and I get this question all the time, if you're diabetic, you can't eat maple sugar or honey because chemically they will spike your blood sugar. But if you're not diabetic, I really, really, really want you to understand that the sugar that you're eating in everything, anything with a label. Also, the gospel according to Mimi here is read, period, the period label.
Yeah.
Period.
And if you can't pronounce it, it's a problem. Yeah.
Don't. And so, but to go back to the weird food that I want you to know about is allulose.
In replace of sugar.
Got it? In place of sugar. Allulose. Terrible name. Ew. But it's food. It's real food. And it's a great sugar replacement. It's not cheap. I'm sorry. But if you'll stop going to Starbucks for snacks and stuff, you will save plenty of money for your allulose. No worries. It's not inexpensive, but it's excellent. So if you have that in your kitchen all the time, and they make a brown version that's like brown sugar, and they make powdered to make frostings and so on. But if you've got that in your toolbox, you can have this whole swell world. In my brownies, for example, they are made of pumpkin, a whole can of pumpkin, a whole can of nut butter. You can use the kind of nut butter you want, whatever you've got, but no sugar in it. No, just nut butter, nothing but nut butter. So pumpkin, nut butter, eggs or egg substitute, allulose, or another one is monk fruit, but they usually mix it with erythritol, and erythritol is
not great for everybody. Yeah.
So
no flour,
no added grease, no. Cinnamon, also excellent, really healthy. And one of my favorite health foods, cocoa, chocolate, right? It's a great health food. It's fabulous food. Eat all you want. Just don't eat sugar with it. So these brownies are a way to get this wonderful health food, cocoa and nut butter and pumpkin and eggs. It's a very high protein.
Yeah.
It's high in fiber. It's nutrient dense, and it's a brownie.
Is the brownie very dense, like fudgy? Because I'm thinking no flour. It's less cakey.
Well, a miracle happens when you put nut butter and pumpkin together.
Really? What miracle is that?
They tend to be sort of cakey.
Really?
And you can control the cakiness by the cooking temperature. If you cook it at 350, it's going to be one thing. If you cook it at 3, it's going to be more fudgy. You can also tweak how much of one or the other you put in. If you're passionate about wanting it really gooey, then you can put a little less pumpkin in it. And, then the balance of the nut butter makes it gooier, because I want it to be your brownie to go recipe.
Yeah.
And what you can make it freezes beautifully. Grandkids come in the door. Hey, honey, how about a brownie? I mean, who's the best grandma on the block this week? If they eat a brownie or two, that's a great meal. If that's all they have for breakfast, you're good. Go on now. Go play.
Right, because it's healthy things in it. Sure.
Well, it's protein.
Yeah.
Not just healthy, but really solid. Everybody knows they need to eat more vegetables and more nuts.
Yep.
There you are.
You got both in there. Yeah.
So
wow.
That if that's the only thing you do, I think it'll improve your life. There you go.
So that's your brownies for breakfast, and that's where the whole name came from. Is this ability to eat these for breakfast? Is that the secret for the not using the flour? So is the replacement any time that you would traditionally use flour? Are you suggesting the butters and the pumpkin?
No, because there are times like when you do my mushroom soup.
You're not going to put that.
No, but it's like 3 ingredients. And I promise you, it is so good. You're going to go, I could have been making this mushroom soup all these years, and I've been using that crap in the can. And mushrooms are, this, Marianne, they're so healthy. They're so nutrient dense. They're so wonderful. And so mushroom soup is onions and mushrooms and a little bit of butter if you want to, or ghee, or a little olive oil and some broth. And then you cook it. That's it. Right before you serve it, you blend it, and you can put a little bit of yogurt on the top to make it fancy. But I recommend putting a little bit of bourbon in it.
Okay. Before you serve it or before you're done cooking it.
Either way. But please don't give this to anyone you don't like, you don't want to come back, you don't want to date again, whatever. This is one of those things, they talk about marry me chicken or whatever. Somebody gets a taste of this and goes, I think I love you.
So it's one of your favorites. People ask for this.
Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping for in a lot of these recipes is they're ordinary food. They're food that's familiar to you, but we've made it the right way here so that it's healthy and inexpensive and easy. There's one called Genius Soup. This is a grandma thing for sure, because it's that same soup that grandmas have been doing for centuries, I think. And you saute some carrots and some onions and some celery chopped up. And then you open up your fridge, your crisper, and you pull out all the stuff that needs to be eaten. The kale that you had very intended to do, or the chard, the arugula, the cabbage, all of it in the pot, all of it. Chop it in the pot. Fill the pot up. Tomatoes, if you've got them, they're kind of sorry looking. Throw them in the pot. If you've got a can, you throw it in the pot, and you cook it all afternoon, or you can put it in your crock pot, and then you have this fabulous, and you season it, and I tell you how to do that. Not a big deal. And then you have the basis for a whole week's worth of meals. So you can make lentils, which we know lentils are fabulous food right now. Beans, any kind of beans. You can, chickpea pasta. Are you using chickpea pasta?
I am not.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you're seeing me today. It's about to get so much better. Chickpea pasta, fabulous. It's, again, sounds like, why, but tastes great. And the secret is don't make it the way they tell you to on the box.
Okay.
Make it by putting it in, for this soup is a perfect example. Put it right in the soup and let it come to a boil, and then you turn it off and put the lid on and let it sit in the soup.
Because it gets the flavor of the soup.
Yes, and it doesn't get all mushy. And chickpea pasta has great fiber in it and a great nutritional proof. It's one thing. It's made out of chickpeas, very high protein, vegetable protein, which is vital for all of us to get that particular kind of protein. And it's inexpensive.
I don't think I've ever seen it. Is it in the box pasta aisle? Is that where you find it?
Do you not have a Trader Joe's?
Not close by. About an hour away is a Trader Joe's.
Love Trader Joe's. But I get a lot of stuff from Thrive Market online, and they're not expensive. They're good to deal with. It's an easy website, and they are not paying me. I mean, if they want to send me a check, fine, I'll take it. But I found them very reliable and good. I've never had a problem with them. And a lot of these things, allulose and another kombucha. Are we loving kombucha now?
Me are not, but I mean, it's a thing. People love it. Not a fan.
Well, you haven't had any really yummy kombucha then yet.
That's true story. That's a true story.
Yeah, and you can get some from Thrive Market for sure. You can get it from Trader Joe's for sure. And I bring it up because another thing that I think a lot of diet folks or food sector folks don't talk about enough is fermented foods. Very, very important. And I like to recommend once a day, at least, something fermented. Kimchi. Do you use kimchi?
I do not.
Okay. All kimchi is sauerkraut with an attitude, out with some style. It has color, it has more texture, has a little more spice, but it's just an alternative to sauerkraut. The same kind. It's made from cabbage and other vegetables, but it has a wonderful taste. And one of the things I love to do with it, Marianne, is make a kimchi grilled sandwich, where you toast a couple pieces of great bread, and let's talk about what great bread is too in a minute, with some goat cheese, and then you bring it out of the toaster oven, and you've squished the liquid out of. You can do it with sauerkraut, but I like to do it with kimchi, and I put it between the slices of toasted bread and cheese. Fabulous meal. I mean, there's a breakfast that is just heavenly. But the bread you're eating needs to be sourdough, whole grain, maybe 3 seed. I love a walnut bread. Do you have a good bakery where you can get that kind of thing?
I do have a good bakery. Yes, definitely. There's a lot of small, almost home type bakeries here. So yeah. But honestly, I'll tell you, I try to stay away from bread. I don't eat much of it. I used to eat a ton of bread. I mean, that's one of those things that I really love. So it's not saying I won't eat it. And I don't believe in the, bad you can't have.
The reason you loved bread is because bread is the way Americans make bread and typically eat bread is sugar. And it has a higher glycemic index often, depending on what it is, than cane sugar. And sugar is addictive. And I'm not saying that in a metaphorical way. It's more addictive, according to a lot of research, than heroin. And another thing, my daughter, my youngest, is a nurse practitioner, and she also has had cancer. She's had breast cancer. And so we have intensified our research about this and talk about it all the time. And finally, in her life, her oncologist was the first one who I've ever known to say to a patient, and here's what I'd like you to eat now, and you'll notice there's no sugar on it.
Oh, specifically cut it.
Specifically. And do you know why?
Well, I mean, I do think the studies show that it can lead to cancerous building cells. Yeah, I think I've seen or heard research on that.
And my daughter had a way of saying it that I thought, okay. She said, Ma, don't you know they use sugar as bait when they're testing you to see if you still have any cancer in your body? They put a chemical in there that finds the sugar, and that's where the cancer is.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting.
Chemical is sugar, I should say, and it finds the cancer because it's bait for the cancer. The cancer is attracted to the sugar because that's what it wants to eat. So when I say it like that,
yeah,
and it's obvious, this is not a biochemist speaking now, but I hope that people will hear that and go, dang, yeah, I don't want to feed any cancer, because we all have cancer cells in our body, but you don't want to feed it. And what it wants to eat is sugar.
So interesting.
It is interesting.
Well, and I think it's so important too, because as you're talking, you're really trying to reiterate that it's not about depriving.
No.
Right. And it's not about having to eat all the the gross stuff, though we may have a disagreement about some of those things you mentioned. But no, the point is that there's a lot of options that are healthier, that taste really great, and especially if combined well.
Yes, and are more colorful and more interesting. And, you know, what we're eating differently, thank goodness, than when we grew up. We grew up at a time when our mothers were so thrilled that they could get this instant stuff in a box, that they could just open the box and make it, and where General Foods and all these big companies, Kellogg's, you know, had discovered this gold mine of selling sugar to children. And we developed the craveability industry of all these people in buildings in New Jersey who make a living making things just irresistibly yummy, regardless of what it does to you or for you. Their job is to make you want to eat it again, and they know how to do that.
Yes.
And so now our job is to learn how to eat kind of all over again. But the beauty of eating good food is that you're not hungry. You can eat what you want to eat. You can sit and eat enough until you go, okay, thanks. No, that's enough. One of your guests, Sarah Ballantyne, I think it was talking about eating breakfast, making sure that you ate protein for breakfast. I don't always eat breakfast. It depends. But I am adamant about encouraging people to go as light on dinner, as early on dinner. And if you want to skip a meal, skip dinner. Eat a late lunch, eat what you eat beautifully. You know, have some chickpea pasta, have, you know, some cheese, have some fruit, have some meat, have a good solid meal. And then check in with yourself later. And if you want some nuts or something at 4 or 5, great. But I promise you, you will likely not truly be hungry for an evening meal. And what that leads us to is autophagy. Have we talked about autophagy on the show before?
I don't think we have.
Oh, good. A new vocabulary word. Okay, first allulose. Don't forget that one.
And well, I won't forget that one.
And autophagy, it simply means self-eating. Groody. But it is the process by which your cells, particularly your brain cells, renew themselves. This is going to sound a little weird, but they eat up they recycle the bits and pieces of the old worn out cells and renew themselves. So this is a cleaning process that takes place, and it needs liquid. You need to have plenty of water in your system. And it can only take place, it's kind of like the freeway where it has to wait till the traffic's gone, and then the guys, the shovels and stuff. It can only take place for 14 to 16 hours. There's research going on trying to pinpoint that, but it's probably different in different people. But it takes a while for your body to not be dealing with digesting food. And if you're eating all the time, if you're doing pizza in front of Jimmy Kimmel at night, your little brain's going, wait a minute, we need a bath. Your body can't do it. So, and when you're thinking, I know, I can hear you thinking 14 to 16 hours between meals, it's easy when you think about it.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that. I think the research is there and that's what led to the big uprising in intermittent fasting, right? It's that just making that window, whatever it is for people, whatever you can do to lengthen that window, non-eating window. Yeah, I think there's so much science there that
it's easy to do if you've eaten your last meal at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and then meal is 7 or 8 the next morning. You've done it.
Yeah,
you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those that eat later, I mean, many of us don't eat. When we say breakfast, it's just whenever you eat that first meal, but that could be 11 o'clock, right? It doesn't have to be at 8 a.m. So whenever you get hungry, I think is the key there to break that fast.
We know that it's not just what you eat, it's your sleep and your movement. It's all part of the same system. So by shifting this eating pattern, what you're also doing is you're sleeping better, because you're not digesting this big old glomp of pizza that you ate in front of Jimmy Kimmel. Your body is much happier if you just assign one heavy task at a time, right? And you'll be amazed at how much better you sleep if you've been in the habit of eating kind of later.
Yeah.
Even 7 o'clock at night is late.
Yes, I agree. I think the other thing that's interesting in that originally when I shifted some of my eating patterns really surprised me was back to your comment about craving the sugar and craving that kind of food. When you start eating the rainbow, when you start eating the whole foods, you suddenly start craving that stuff. And it's just a wild phenomenon if it's not something that if you haven't always eaten that way. And then suddenly you find yourself wanting the piece of fruit or wanting the salad or wanting the, whatever. It does happen. Your body naturally shifts and
Absolutely.
starts to crave those things.
Your saliva actually changes, chemically changes, so that, in my case, sugar tastes weird. It makes me thirsty. It's kind of yucky. But I also want to confess to all of you out there going, yeah, fine, yada, yada. What happened? Yeah, when I go out to celebrate a birthday with my girlfriends, do I eat a bite of the key lime pie as I did the other night? Yes, I do. I'm not going to get all rabid about this. But the weird thing is, I'll have a bite or two and go, I'm good, really.
Yeah, it's always about the balance of, try to stick with that 80-20 rule or something close to that, right? I talked to Alison Blott on a recent episode, and she said it's more like 90-10 when you get over 50. But, try to eat the whole foods, right? 80-90% of the time, and you're going to be okay. It's not like you can't have anything else, but mostly.
Let's talk now about the A word.
Which A word?
Aging.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about aging. So I'm going to do what I don't often do, but I'm going to ask you to tell everybody how old you are.
Well, I'm glad you're asking because I'm happy to say, because as we were talking earlier, I find it kind of weird and fascinating to be almost 80.
Right.
And what's strange is that I've never been happier. I feel fabulous. I'm having fun. I have freedom that I never had. I mean, as someone who had a bunch of kids, and our last dog died a couple of weeks ago, and he was fabulous, and I loved him, and I miss him like crazy, and lots of tears have been shed here. But also, for the first time since the early 70s, I'm a free woman.
Yeah.
My husband and I can go somewhere. We were doing dog memory care and hospice care for months. And his name was Vigo, and he was a super wonderful, big old sled dog. We loved him.
Aww.
But we now have our lives back in a way and can do some stuff. So you want to be healthy enough to enjoy that when you get to your life where you're not having to grind to make money all the time, and where the kids are sort of having fun on their own. My oldest, my son, is going to be 50.
Right.
What?
Well, but it's so cool to just be talking about this because for so many reasons. For one, I think that it's a very new conversation, and there are just now starting to be people and, role models, imagery of people your age, vibrant, that, I didn't grow up thinking that you could be 80 and that you could be, and still being completely independent and vibrant and doing all the things. Yeah. We didn't have that. And now we're starting to have that conversation, see it play out around us. And we're really starting to understand that you can put your full-time career or you're working full-time away at some point if you want to and still have
or not,
but still, or at least the point being you can make different choices and still have 20 or 30 or 40 years left to really pursue those passions. And if you're healthy, it's key. And the key is it has to start. I mean, it should start in your 20s and 30s, but wherever you are now, start.
And we wish we could all go back and be a little bit better about it. And I have a little of an advantage in that I knew pretty early in my life, in my 40s, that I was diabetic. So I got a head start on it. And for reasons I've already discussed, I was already passionate about it, interested in it, but never too late. And the other thing is that I was not athletic. I danced and, did a few things, but I didn't have time for that. I worked, and that was what I did.
Yeah. And you had the kids.
Right. But I'm now weightlifting. I
Love
have
that.
the privilege and freedom and joy of being able to take 4 days a week of a wonderful little gym in town and a great trainer. And so just this past year, I added strength training, weightlifting to the program with him. And do I love it? No, it's hard.
Oh, that's so great that you're being so transparent. But the research is it's so important to add that
It's
strength
so
training.
important, and it is fun. I do it with a couple other girlfriends, and we laugh and yell and pick at each other, and it's really fun. And my husband is enjoying the results. He more than I do because he'll say to me, "Hey, um, follows me up the stairs, stuff."
Yeah. But do you notice things like, oh, maybe you always could do this, but like, the picture of the people getting older that can't open their own jars or they can't lift their suitcase above their head in the airplane. I mean, those are the things we want to be able to do independently.
I can still chase down a wiggly toddler
Yes.
and lift him and get him out of his crib,
Right.
But I've learned good ways to do that so I don't hurt myself. Another surprise to me was when I did a little deep dive on injuries in older women. And I've heard about that. Well, honey, it's going to be a fall. You're going to have a bad fall and you're going to break a hip and then that'll be it. Once you've had that fall, it's just weeks and I mean, we've heard this, haven't we?
Yes, I'm just
Right?
trying to figure out whose voice you're channeling, but yes.
Got a few, as you can imagine. That's actually my Aunt Frosty from Oklahoma.
Oh man.
My favorite expressions of hers is, "Oh, she don't eat more than she can put in her ear."
Oh, she must be fun. But yes, the
Well,
fall. And statistics do support that falls are a big thing.
yeah. So we're going to fall, and so it turns out that you fall not because and you injure yourself and you die weeks later, not because your bones are weak. It's because your muscles are weak.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have the musculature and you don't have the balance, yeah, you're going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're likely to break some bones.
Yeah.
So, what you want to do is keep your muscles as strong as possible and keep your balance as good as possible. And then, yes, you want bone strength. And how do we get bone strength? Well, eating your protein, good protein. But here's another one: hormones. And I will not sell myself as an expert here, but I have consulted experts and feel like I'm doing an interesting program in this regard. And what I'm using are topically applied, bioidentical hormones, so estradiol and progesterone. So for all of you who've read all that stuff about how hormones give you cancer and so on, but now we know that some bad studies, one huge study was done that was
Yes.
misleading. Women of a certain age, when you look at the studies, you realize they assume that if you weren't dead at the age of 70, you wanted to be,
Yeah.
right?
I agree. I was just thinking about this because it came up in conversation this morning. I do still think there's a hesitance in the U.S. specifically around getting them and finding doctors that are, in support. I think it's a lot harder than it is outside of the US. I guess that's just what I hear. That's, what I've run into. But I think it's changing. I think the conversation is changing. So hopefully, to your point about that study, and everybody brings it up now that I talked to, recognizing that it was an erroneous study or the data was just pointed at women and it wasn't even for women. So I think that messaging is starting to get out there. So that's important.
The other thing, Marianne, is we have more women are graduating from medical school now than men.
Yes, that's a good thing.
My gosh. I mean, the difference between when I had my babies in the 70s, all men, it's so wonderful now to see our daughters giving birth with women as the OBs,
Oh, yeah.
lactation consultants,
All of it. Yeah. It's so different.
you know.
So different, even in my, right? And you've got a few years on me, but even the difference that I have with my own girls, it's a huge difference. Huge. So it must be even more significant.
It's been such a joy to have babies with my daughters. My son was across the country, so I missed that. But they had a good experience with their women's circle around them as
Yeah.
they gave birth to their little girl. But being in the room with my daughters and watching how beautifully they were helped, and how wonderful those births were, huge difference. Now, I love men. I don't mean to say that I don't. And there are definitely some things that they do that are brilliant and better than we do it and all that. I can't think of any right now, but I'm sure there are some. And I'm teasing.
No, of course you are, but they're not women and they don't, so therefore they can't feel the things we feel and understand some of our parts inside in the way that they feel for us and etc.
A friend of mine was telling me the other day about giving birth, and her doctor, actually, she said it was a nurse, a guy, trying to tell her what it felt like, what labor pains felt like. And
Right.
said, I so would have murdered him. Had I been able to get up and reach out for him, I would have killed him right on the spot.
I mean, it's in the way they deliver it too, right? Because there are definitely some great doctors out there with great bedside manners and probably have, women all around them in their lives and they get it. And they're probably trying to explain it in the best way they can. But the bottom line is they don't know. They've never felt it. So they can't really.
And they don't have those hormones and they never will.
Right. Right.
And those are
so you believe in the topical hormones.
Yeah.
That's where we started. We came full circle, but you strongly believe in the topical hormones. And
I'm getting a very good effect, I think. And the testing will go on, but I think learning, I'm happy to be a test subject, learning how to stay strong in our bones, in our muscles as we age. I mean, certainly that's a huge part of staying healthy. And this whole business of the weightlifting and so on, we don't all have access to a good trainer or the time or money or energy or whatever to do some of this stuff, but you can improvise a lot too. And if you have it in your mind that this is a thing that you need to do, I'm with you there. I mean, I think it's huge. Staying, just moving, walking, doing, picking up stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the point, right? You don't have to, it's great if you have the fancy gym and you have a trainer, a personal trainer. Of course, it's great, but you can walk. And you can use water bottles. I'm reaching for a water bottle. I mean, you can start with something as small as that to lift and then graduate to something else, a backpack, or use your own body weight, whatever. There's always things you can do. And we've had episodes with people that have gotten great, great advice around just in your own home and how to.
Push-ups and planks. You can do this.
Yeah.
I'm still in my workout clothes from this morning.
Well, and if you can't do those right away, you can always do them on the wall. Like there's always ways to modify to just do it. I think the point though is knowing, to your point, having it in your head about how important it is and to start as early as possible. And no, we can't go backwards, but as early, wherever you stand today, do something that your future self would be thankful for. I think that's important. I want to ask you one last question because obviously we could talk for 17 hours, but they're not going to listen. They're not going to listen for 17 hours. All right, this is going to be a good one. It's going to be a hard one. What's the best piece of advice you ever got?
That I ever got? Well, I dish it out, but the best piece of advice I ever got. I
guess we could say, or you would give if you had to give just one piece of advice.
But that's an intriguing question for me because I'm gonna have to call you tomorrow. What that is, because I'm struggling with it. I got some bad advice. I could easily go to the rotten advice, but the advice that I like to give out and that someone probably gave to me at one time or other is say yes. Say yes.
I like that one.
Go ahead and have the adventure. whatever it is, go ahead and take a bite. Go ahead, look into it. Go ahead. I think women particularly are just too timid most of the time. We're socialized to say no.
Well, don't you think part of that, though, is we're also socialized to be putting ourselves last?
Yes. And
right.
We are socialized to say yes at the wrong time.
Yeah.
No at the wrong time. But putting yourself last. But I was too stupid to be frightened for a lot of my life, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I didn't know any better, and I just went ahead and did some stuff, I got on that ship and crossed the Atlantic by myself. Those are the things that make our life, I think, really rich.
I think your next story needs to be about all the adventures that you've had in your life and misadventures. Boy, those grandchildren would love to read that book.
I got those.
Of course you do. You don't get to be 80 and not have any misadventures.
Yeah, I had a ton. And plus, God, I graduated from high school in 1964.
Yeah, you've seen a lot.
What a time. What a different time. And my first full-time job in an advertising agency, I like to say this because you've all seen Mad Men, right? My first full-time job in an ad agency was 1966. So you know exactly what I was wearing, what kind of cigarettes I was smoking.
Oh, I love it.
What my lunches looked like. That was me.
Well, and I love that image because, for the whole first, 50 minutes of our conversation, you talked about all the things, healthy things, healthy habits, consistency with that. But then you just talked about when you smoke that cigarette, right? So I think that's important for people to hear because when we know more, we do better, but you can't get hung up on what you did in your past. It's how do we go forward from here?
Yeah. And no regrets.
No regrets. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much of your wisdom. I can't wait to check out the book and some of those recipes. Brownies for breakfast.
It's been great. Thank you, Marianne.
Thanks so much. And we'll put all your links and information to the book in the show notes for people.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.